Recently here on Maker's Muse, I made a video talking about the dangers of open frame, cheap laser cutters that are currently flooding the market. I was appalled to come across these advertisements showing these machines used in the presence of children and pets with no protective measures in place. And in that video I talked about my experience using laser cutters and just how dangerous they can be if things go wrong. And that video was really well received, but what I thought was even cooler was the fact that all of these people from the industry who use laser cutters for their jobs and have 15, 20 years experience were sharing their thoughts in the comments of that video. But the thing about YouTube is it follows the algorithm, and I'm worried that these really important nuggets of knowledge would get lost if I didn't address them in a follow-up video. Some of them address things I got wrong in my video, and some of them add even more detail to what I think is a really important issue that needs to be addressed. So grab yourself a cup of tea and let's get started. So we'll start in no particular order with Dominion's Caves comment, where they say, would not using a scroll saw be a good alternative to a laser cutter for most hard materials? Audi was selling a good cheap one a month ago for this very purpose. And that's just the thing, isn't it? Laser cutters are incredibly useful tools. They let you create prototypes and functional products way faster than 3D printers. But as I mentioned in my video, the materials that you can laser cut are much more limited compared to what materials you can just cut using other tools. And that's the thing, like a scroll saw, or in my case I have a bandsaw, is a really useful addition to a workshop that can let you cut materials safely, such as polycarbonates and that don't laser cut very well. But it's still a manual process, and you can't exactly engrave detailed, intricate logos and patterns using a scroll saw. So yes, a scroll saw for a lot of cases could replace what you do with a laser cutter, but it can't fully replace the detail and intricacies that you can get out of a laser cutting system. To go on, also, they talk about the safety of acrylic, and say, yeah, I created a display box to house a large model out of acrylic sheets, bought from Bunnings, and just cutting it with a saw gave a horrible smell. Had to open the doors and windows just in case the fumes were toxic. And again, going back to my video, the smells that you get, the fumes you get from acrylic really do smell acrid. They're not very pleasant. I've definitely noticed the smells they're talking about when I've been just drilling acrylic, but yeah, when you laser cut it, it makes a horrible smell. So you do need a very good ventilation system, and ideally some sort of filter before it does get vented out of the building. Next up, we have Spirit's comment on the goggles that these lasers come with. And this is something a lot of people commented that I didn't touch on enough in the video, so I'm really happy to have this comment here to read to you and share my thoughts. For the record, the cheap gantry cutters and fiber markers both come with completely useless fake goggles 99% of the time. We've tested most Chinese goggles and they vary in quality from Mrs. Critical Absorption lines to colorful plastic LMAO. You need a very large, respectable Western brand name, Thorlabs Edmund Laser Glow. And that comment's truncated for some reason. But yeah, absolutely, I agree. The thing is, with lasers, you need the laser goggles to absorb the wavelength from that laser radiation. So really, and I saw another comment, they're saying that the goggles should actually burn, which means that radiation is being absorbed and converted into heat energy. And if that doesn't happen, then yeah, that laser energy, that radiation is just going to go straight into your retinas and cause damage. I would not trust anything that comes with these lasers. I would absolutely go and source a proper spec'd pair of laser goggles that are spec'd for the wavelength of the diode laser or CO2 laser, for example, and definitely go with the name brand because they have a reputation to uphold and they would have the correct certifications to go with it. Just a quick editing Angus note here. I didn't intend this comment to come off as anti-China. The issue here is that these goggles are not correctly certified and spec'd for the laser wavelengths that need to be absorbed. And these Western brands most likely manufacture their goggles in China. The difference here is they're certified, and these goggles that come with these kits are not. So take your eye protection very seriously and buy a pair of certified goggles. But again, these Western brands most likely manufacture in China anyway. They just have the certification to back up their claims. Tin 2001, cake, you didn't mention cake. My Elks Maker A3 has done a few cakes. Line art can look awesome on top of a cake, but the color is a huge factor in how well it works. Pink icing is very difficult to burn apparently, but brown chocolate icing burns very nicely, albeit hard to see the result. You may require several test cakes to get it right, yum. I love this because it goes back to my original cake icing 3D printer I mentioned. But yeah, you can use a laser to essentially caramelize sugars really effectively. If you overdo it, it will just burn it and it becomes carbon, and carbon is not tasty for anyone who has burnt toffee or that sort of thing. So you can definitely do it. I do worry about the food safety aspect, but I guess if you're only using a laser to mark food products and you're not getting anything like plastics or woods or anything near it, maybe it's okay. But it's really interesting how they talk about the pink icing absorbing the laser radiation less than the brown chocolate icing. And that just goes down to the laser wavelength. So in this case, I assume it's a diode laser, and that makes sense. You need a darker material to absorb that radiation better to make it actually burn. But yeah, you can absolutely use lasers to mark high sugar content foods very easily. And it works fine. I've used it to cut like rice cakes and engrave bread. It just doesn't really taste very nice, but it absolutely can be done. Next up we have Kick1 Ask 20. I have a Trotec laser at work. The filter/extraction unit is almost as big as the laser itself. If I open it too quick after cutting a plastic or even ply sometimes, I hold my breath and walk away. Those fumes are no joke. Absolutely. So Trotec is a very large, well-respected laser cutting company. Their machines are very large, very expensive, certified, very good quality. The extraction systems they come with, similarly, are no joke. They are huge, they are very high power, and they cost a lot. Like, a large portion of the laser cutter itself is the extraction unit. And yeah, they have these to filter out all the particulates and like fumes from whatever you're laser cutting. And yeah, I've been in the same circumstance. I have laser cut a whole sheet of acrylic, and I've opened it up too quickly in my haste to get the parts out, and I've been hit with this wave of acrylic fumes that's just awful. So yeah, like industrially, these systems have very, very large, fridge-sized in some cases, extraction units. And you don't need that big for a hobby system, but you need something pretty substantial. You need a lot of airflow to force it through that filter to get rid of that particulate and fumes. Next up, VidM96. I'm always surprised how easily some YouTubers will feature an unsafe laser device in their videos, or just show careless behavior around lasers, chucking all sorts of materials in them without checking. Thanks for bringing this topic up again. Yeah, this is a tough one. As someone in this YouTube review space, these companies are absolutely trying to throw these machines at you constantly, because if a YouTuber reviews a machine positively, their audience will most likely buy a very large amount of those machines, and it's a really cheap way of getting some marketing out there. It's way cheaper than traditional advertising. So the thing is, you want to grow a YouTube channel, so you want to take on things that people want to watch and see, but you don't want to show them in a negative light, because then you're not going to get any more in future. And I can't speak for other YouTubers, but I have very strong morals where I just am not comfortable promoting anything that's dangerous or misleading to you guys, my audience, like people who watch my videos. I owe it to you to be very, very upfront and clear and transparent about what these things are and what they can do. But there's also the fact that I think a lot of people who are coming into the maker space, this genre, who might not have experience, don't even know how dangerous these things are, because the companies certainly aren't telling them. They show them with blatant lack of safety consideration. So if a reviewer doesn't really think about that, they might not even be aware just how dangerous the practices they're showing are. It's pretty muddy, but yeah. I would say there's a mix. Some YouTubers blatantly ignore it because they want to keep growing the channel positively and get more stuff, and some YouTubers just genuinely don't realize that what they've been sent is actually dangerous, and what they're showing is probably not the best thing. Next up is Wildwood Studio talking about leather. So it says, great video about chrome tan leather. I do pyrography, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but that's burning things to make pictures, wood or leather. And I've always been told to only burn vegetable tanned leather because the chemicals used to tan chrome leather are toxic when burned. So I would assume the same goes for cutting. Now, a lot of people commented this in the video. They said, yes, absolutely, you should never cut chrome tanned leather because it's toxic. There's a few people who said that the nature of the chrome used in the production of the chrome leather, if it's made properly and recently, shouldn't be an issue when burned. So this is an interesting one. Someone actually cited a scientific paper to talk about this. I would still play it safe and not laser cut or burn chrome tan leather. But again, this is where the information's muddy. You got some people saying absolutely never do it. But then you have some people saying, well, actually, according to this, it says it's fine. I'm not going to do it. but you have to make your own informed decision. And this is where it can get complicated because there's a few conflicting answers when it comes to this sort of thing. Next up is Zachary Williams talking about their use of a laser cutter in their work. So it says, great video, I use lasers every day at work, and one bit of advice is, I will add, is to never get complacent or hope for the best. One time we were under a time crunch to do a project. It was an easy project too, cut a circle hole into a rubber cap for 500 caps. We didn't properly vet the rubber and came back the next day to find our lasers, linear rails, brown with rust from chlorine exposure. My intern and I spent the next day and a half wet sanding with 2000 grit sandpaper to restore our laser to working order. Moral of the story, don't rush and hope nothing bad will happen. Deadlines can be moved, due dates can be missed, but your health is priceless. Absolutely. And this is echoed by a lot of other comments where they thought they were buying one material, but it was something else. Like they thought they were buying clear acrylic, but it was clear polycarbonate or clear PVC. And I've actually encountered that with cellophane as well. I did a little thing about cellophane ages ago. It was really hard to find cellophane. Most cellophane now is just a different type of plastic. So it's actually a really big issue coming across plastics and materials that are mislabeled. In this case, it contained chlorine, so it released hydrochloric gas, and then when it combines with the water, it creates hydrochloric acid and rusts everything in its path. This is a really interesting comment by Zuthel Soranes, who said, one thing that I think is important to add is that solid state or diode lasers are far more dangerous to the eye than a CO2 laser of the same power. The light produced by a CO2 laser is absorbed by the outer layers of the eye, so you pretty much have to be looking directly at the beam, such as due to the mirror misalignment, to be blinded by it. But visible or near infrared light produced by solid state and diode lasers goes right through the outer layers of the eye and gets focused on the retina, where even a tiny amount of specularly reflected laser radiation can cause burns on the retina. And it's really scary. I didn't even consider the fact that a CO2 laser, because of the wavelength it produces, it is invisible, but if it's not penetrating the eye the same way that the diode laser's radiation is, that's a really interesting point. The rest of Zuthal's comment is really interesting, talking about the detail of different plastics and how when they're burned, they should be fairly safe, except those that contain chlorine, or they may possibly produce cyanide as a toxic compound. So yeah, you do need to be really careful and very aware of what you're laser cutting. Koizu's comment is terrifying and a really good wake-up call for anyone who sort of thinks that open frame lasers are just, whatever, not that bad. So they say, I've worked with these types of lasers for the textile industry. The open top, we had a homemade laser shield put around it with a power cutoff safety made for the door. He pointed to the door when I was learning that has a scorch mark in it from a random chrome nut that was near the laser path. This was by design and how it was supposed to be assembled, so he changed it up till it was safe to operate with the guidance of another company, whom were also baffled how an industrial laser had so many manufacturer issues and lacking safety features that were standard. I'm baffled that these products are for sale as well. But yeah, a shiny object can very easily disperse laser radiation or even just redirect it like a mirror sharply. And yeah, chrome nut's a perfect example of that because it's very shiny. The laser hits that, it's going to go off in all details or directions. People talk about laser cutting and etching on very shiny metals like brass or aluminium or stainless steel. And that's absolutely a recipe for disaster with a laser to reflect off in all sorts of directions. So again, enclosure, really important. You cannot guarantee that the laser will not reflect off into random directions. And yeah, you cannot control the surrounding environment at all times, especially if it's in a domestic environment. 4110 Mahindra says, quite a rant, young man. Yes, that is quite the compliment. Agreed, the videos and photos used are terrible. With almost 30 years in industrial manufacturing as an engineer dealing with safety and production issues, I can say most of your concerns are easily addressed by the hobby user. A bathroom vent fan and a simple box solves 2/3 of your problems. There's actually quite a bit of material advice out there. And no, don't try to laser cut any chromium tan leather. So they're saying don't cut chromium leather. But look, I don't disagree. There is a lot of information on making things safe. But I just don't believe people are going to do it. I think if people are going to buy the cheapest machine they can, maybe it's the most they could afford is just a bare bones open frame diode laser. I don't believe a lot of them will make an enclosure. I don't believe a lot of them will make a proper ventilation and extraction system. And it comes down to a couple of things. One, they don't really respect the the technology enough to know its dangers and mitigate it. But two, and I stole this from my dad, you don't know what you don't know. So if you buy something without proper education, you don't know that you need to build an enclosure. You've bought it from the factory like that, and it came open frame, so why would you build a homebrew enclosure? Now, yes, it's true that companies are starting to add enclosures to their shop, but they're not coming by default. The machines come open frame and you have to buy it separately, and that's still not okay by me. So yeah, again, you're not wrong, but I just don't believe people will do it, and that's when there'll be injuries, and that's when they'll be held to pay. And I'm just not okay with that. It doesn't sit okay with me. There was a lot more comments about the nasty fumes that plastics can produce, but something that came up quite a lot is this comment about phosgene being released from PVC. And yeah, it's true. Some plastics can release phosgene when burned, which was used in World War I as a chemical warfare agent. Yeah, so again, be really careful with what you're laser cutting. And again, vinyl came up a lot because apparently vinyl records are a common material that people like to heat up and form into shapes like bowls or laser cut into clock shapes. And it's right in the name. It's called a vinyl record because it's made out of vinyl, which is PVC, and it's something you just can't safely cut with a laser. You shouldn't even really be heating it up, to be honest. But there's a whole industry around doing that. So yeah, it's just really scary that some of these materials can release really nasty things. This is a pretty scary comment about a gantry failing from Rua. They say, I've seen the gantry of a cheap laser cutter get stuck due to a small mechanical failure. The belt pulley attached to the stepper motor was spinning freely, thus not driving the belt anymore. Since the laser wasn't moving it, it caused a fire in no time. And this is the thing, laser cutters are dumb. They're just like 3D printers. If a belt breaks or fails in some way, they'll just keep trying to move. Unless they have some sort of advanced feedback system, which is starting to come into effect, but really, most of these machines just don't know. They get fed dumb G-code commands and they try to follow them, and they just are not aware if something breaks. So if a laser cutter is broken, if the gantry has lost a belt or it's come free, it's just going to be in one spot, blasting laser radiation, and that's going to cause a fire instantly. Please never leave these machines unattended. You should always make sure that they're attended in case something goes wrong, because they can easily start fires. I mean, they burn things during their normal operation. They can easily burn them too much and start a fire. But just make sure you're properly protected if you're going to be observing them with proper safety goggles and ideally an enclosure. I thought this is an interesting point from Matt Traven. They say, why are you filtering air on its way to be vented? And that's honestly an interesting point, because yeah, if you're just venting it, why should you care if it's filtered or not? But I care because it's going into the outside environment where there's animals like birds and my neighbors, who I don't think would appreciate having nasty smoke and fumes blasted into their windows. A lot of people live in apartments, and yeah, just venting out the window is going to just drift right back into someone's bathroom window or onto their balcony where they're sitting and just trying to enjoy their day. And that's not okay. It doesn't sit well by me. So I would say you need to filter it as well as possible and then vent externally for it to be dispersed into the atmosphere. But I just don't think it's okay to just vent it without any kind of attempt, at least, to clean it up a little bit. Then next up, we have this comment by Michael Newman, who's one of my supporters over at the Maker's Muse community, which you should definitely go check out. It's been a soft launch, but this is the replacement for Patreon. And essentially, you can get to see all the behind-the-scenes information, upcoming videos. You can share your thoughts and comments on what you'd like to see on the channel in the suggestions tab. It's a bit like an old-school forum, but with all sorts of interesting 3D printing goodness behind the scenes. So go check it out if you're interested. But yeah, Michael Newman says here that they watched the video and that their thoughts are almost exactly the same as mine in terms of laser cutters. So they go on to say, I originally tried using one indoors, but the first time I tried etching on wood, I thought my wife was going to kick me out of the house. And with the laser, it's exposed, my kids kept trying to see the light emitted and wanted to go up to it and watch. And yeah, absolutely, what child or pet would not be attracted to a bright, like, fancy laser light moving around. You know, cats chase laser pointers, kids are attracted to shiny things. That's why these machines can be so dangerous, because they're not so much dangerous to you if you're aware of what they do, they're dangerous to everyone else and the animals that may be nearby that may approach it and then get hurt in some way. So you need to mitigate those risks. I always run these machines in a garage environment because I know I can close the doors, I can have the vent going outside, and I know no one's going to be at risk except me, and I take the adequate precautions to make sure I am as safe as possible. Because you can't control children, and you certainly can't control cats and dogs. Like in this video, it's just so ridiculous to show an animal next to these machines. It just drives me insane. So it's an interesting insight from Michael about their experience with these machines. So thank you so much for leaving your comments on the laser cutter safety video. I read every single comment you leave on this channel, and it was a really good insight into these machines and how people consider them and treat them with safety and respect. And yeah, I really do think that these companies should be held accountable for the products they're putting out into the hands of makers who just want to make cool stuff but might not fully understand just how dangerous these machines are. And these companies don't seem to really care. And if you're in industry, thank you so much for leaving your comments on that video as well. I really appreciate your insight. And I do wish that YouTube still allowed annotations, because then I could go back and change a few things in the video I made, but you can't anymore. Once you upload, it's like just done. So I did say in that video that HIPS, high impact polystyrene, is probably safe to cut, but according to a lot of you guys in the comments, it's probably not. So don't laser cut high impact polystyrene. I'm not going to be doing it in future. And I really do appreciate you sharing your expertise in the comments below. So thank you so much for watching. If you have anything else to add to this topic, then please leave them below. And if you enjoyed this video here on Maker's Muse, then maybe consider subscribing so you don't miss any future content. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.